Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to The Element Podcast. What's happening, all my woods people? We are sitting in an adjoining, much better house than the Mouse House right now. I'm glad to be over here and podcasting in this room, man. It's just a touch less musky than the Mouse House.
It is. It is a little bit less musk involved in here, but there's a little bit more, I would say more mess, but the Mouse House is pretty messy right now, too. So, it's just a messy old mouse house right here. That's all there is to it.
It's all right, dude. It's all right, man. My house is a spider house right now.
Ooh.
We had the working man come over and spray, and he sprays around the outside. Mm-hmm. And when he does that, like, spiders just come inside.
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand.
Sneaky spides.
I don't get it. Sneaky spides. We have an awesome guest who has been on the podcast at least twice that I know of. Mm-hmm. I know we did one kind of long episode with him in the very beginning, like episode 4, I think. This is like our first guest.
Yes.
Whit Fosburgh from the TRCP, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. He was like one of our first guests. He's also he's been there, done that. And so, like, knowing that, I was super intimidated. I remember we had a much different, more basic setup podcasting wise, and we had never done an actual phone interview.
We'd actually just came off of a failed phone interview like the week before.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
So I was literally just on the edge of my seat the whole time. I don't think I listened to a word Whit said that podcast. But then he came on and talked about, he did a big buck breakdown because he shot a giant up in like the place that giants don't exist in the Northeast, and now he's back. And what is good about this episode that you guys are going to enjoy as opposed to other conservation media a lot of times is that this is all about positivity.
That's right. Ooh, good things, baby. Good things.
Dude, that's your thing, man, is optimism.
That's
and
it.
I knew you would eat this up, dude.
I love it, dude. I love it.
We're going to talk about all the good things that are going on in North America right now, and there are a lot of them. So I think you guys are going to really enjoy this episode. But in the meantime, before we get to that, we and you.
Nosotros.
Nosotros. Never mind. I'm not going to go. So we have been doing our own thing lately pretty much, but we did go squirrel hunting. And I don't know if we even talked about this on the podcast because we've been so irregular. It's been a lot of work in 2019 for us, man.
Yes, it has. Mine has been more just on the labor front end. You've been holding it down on the element side of things a lot, but just a lot of things happened at the end of 2018 and beginning of 2019 that it just kind of threw us into a whirlwind of sorts. But we did get to go have some fun together 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and it was fun. Like,
oh my gosh,
it was like sometimes when we go out, we're like, okay, we got to go hunt some pub for some deer. And it's going to be literally like, I hate to say this, but it's going to be kind of a drag probably, like we're not going to see many deer. And then we're going to,
especially when you get your wig out and stuff like
and then we're going to have to like midday, we're going to have to come in, rush a lunch real quick, do an interview at this time with somebody for the podcast, wrap it up, edit it, and spit it out before the afternoon hunt. And it's a lot of work. And when we're not hunting together, so like, i.e. now during non-hunting season, it's like getting podcasts done can be a lot of work. It's like, it's just, we pretty much do what probably a lot of you listeners do when we work, a lot of hours. So getting together has been a chore, but we have done it, and we got to do the squirrel thing a couple weeks back. And like I said, I don't even remember if we've talked about this much, but we're going to be releasing the film on it. I'm hoping this coming Tuesday, which is going to be the 19th, I believe. And it was pretty awesome. Like it was just kind of like slow. It was a real slow morning. And then it like worked into the afternoon where it started picking up. And then by like the golden hour, it was just crazy. Like squirrels were just flying everywhere.
Just as a tease, I'm pretty sure I shot 4 squirrels in less than a minute
without
moving. Taking a step. It was unreal. You're just gonna have to watch the footage to see. I don't know how well it was captured. I haven't got to see this yet, but
it's pretty good.
Yeah, good.
I didn't do a great job, but you did capturing your own shots.
Did I really capture my own shots?
Yeah.
Did I have a camera on tripod or something?
No,
I don't
just
even remember.
your just gun barrel.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I had a GoPro on it.
Yeah,
so
cool.
It's cool though. Like they're close enough where you can see most of them.
Sweet.
And man, it was fun. I shot a new species of something. You'll have to watch to find out. I was super, super excited about.
Bing, bing.
Anyway, that was a lot of fun. That video will be coming out soon. In the meantime, if you haven't watched the Meat Buck film, it is titled Texas Public Land Buck, and it's on YouTube. It is the video of Casey's meat buck, the infamous meat buck. You got raged on that. I know,
man.
Dude.
People apparently don't like the idea that like you shoot animals for meat. It's kind of really weird. Like we live in such a contrast, and we didn't even plan on talking about this too much, but like hunters, I'm going to criticize us, okay?
Yeah, okay?
Criticize us as hunters. We like to like talk about how like, oh, we're all in this for the organic meat that we obtain for our families, right? And all this stuff. But then when you say that you shot that deer for that purpose, people freak out because they're like, oh, all deer matter, dude. It's not just about that. I was like, okay.
Deer lives matter.
Yeah, and it's like we literally participate in an industry that is almost completely funded by big antlers.
Yeah.
Like, I would say 99.99%. There might be like a little bitty smidgen of a person who really enjoys watching does and small bucks get shot, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they really like. But otherwise, it's all funded about antlers. So when you shoot something not because of the antlers, people get really weirded out about it.
Yeah, I mean, I like in your interview on this, you talk about how you're like, this isn't the buck that I would have shot on October 3rd. You know what I mean? And it's true, man. Like it's not because you don't care about meat at that point in the season, but like you value the meat enough that at the end of the season, you're willing to let go of this challenge, these standards that challenge you to obtain the meat.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it's you weigh out these things in your mind of like necessities versus like desires, right?
Right.
It was more of a necessity for me to shoot that deer. I still wanted to shoot it, don't get me wrong, but I was looking at my freezer and said, okay, I need this much for us to make it until next deer season or next elk season or whatever it might be.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I've already eaten part of the back strap off that.
Good.
Dude.
I still have a whole one in the freezer. I didn't even touch, man.
I got a solid third. I'm gonna have to get them cut in. I didn't realize, but this Texas deer are gonna have to be cut into halves for my family.
You said thirds, and I was
thirds work on a Midwest deer for me.
Yeah, well,
but also my kids are getting bigger too.
We're talking horses and ponies at that point, man.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, you are just managing the herd as far as I'm concerned, and you're going to be managing the herd on a new property that we've been talking about, we've been alluding to lately. And you've been doing a lot of work there, but recently you've done some kind of sticky things there.
I have.
We're not talking about Greenbrier either.
I've been trying to be real, if you know what I'm saying.
So funny.
So I did something that's really not whitetail related, but way down the chain it is. And this is why it's cool. Okay, so this property that me and my wife purchased is going to be our homestead. We're going to build there. We're going to hunt there. We're going to raise our kids there. And hopefully be able to, like, one of my big goals is to be able to give my kids a great outdoor education at all times. Like, that's something I'm super passionate about, right? So this property is going to be, in my dreams, and I'm hope to make that a reality, like a really cool outdoor classroom, okay? It's going to take some cleaning up and some things to do beforehand. This past weekend, we went out to actually push down this old rotten house that was on the place so that we can build our new place. Well, we went to pushing on this place, and all of a sudden, bees went everywhere. And we were like, oh, man, got to watch out for that spot. And then it never clicked to me that I should get those bees, because it just so happens I had a bee box I'd purchased to put bees on the property at one point in time.
I'm glad you clarified. I was saying you said beatbox.
No. Anyways, so ends up we couldn't get the house pushed down because the tractor wasn't big enough, had to resort to a dozer, which was a whole nother story. But they gave me an opportunity to go borrow a bee suit from our friend Slade Daniel, who's on the podcast last week.
Yeah.
And borrowed his bee suit, went out, smoked the bees by myself. Not like, didn't like smoke them, but like you get a little smoker and you pump it up, you know, and send a little smoke in there. Actually, what that does is it simulates a forest fire. That's why you do that. It's not to like put the bees in a hibernation or anything, but when you do that, the bees go into honey collection mode, so they go engorge themselves on honey and they stop worrying about you getting into the hive. And I watched it happen because they were all on the outside of it, and I went with this smoke, and they all went way up inside.
Go right up to the honeycomb.
Yeah, and I just started pulling it out and putting it in my bee box. I got all.
So you started pulling the comb out.
The comb out, yeah.
While the bees are on it.
If you can, yeah. And
is that weird?
No.
Like, do you feel like you're smashing them all up in the honey and stuff?
No, not too bad. Yeah, I didn't really smash too much honey. Really, it came out pretty easy. I guess maybe sometimes it's more like stuck to the stuff it's on, but it was stuck to sheetrock in this old house, so it came out pretty simple, you know. But most of the bees kind of all wadded up off the comb because they kept kind of running away from me, and then I just grab them and throw them in the box. But never got stung once.
It's cool.
And the only time the bees even tried to sting was when I would grab them to put them in the box. Some bees would sting my gloves. I could see them stinging. But otherwise, like, I think you could have walked right up there and grabbed a piece of that honeycomb and pulled it out and not get stung by a bee.
Just like a bear.
I straight up think you could.
Just like a bear.
Yeah. And maybe it was the smoke that helped with that, you know? I don't know. But they were surprisingly docile.
It's cool.
Like,
maybe maybe you're a bee whisperer.
I might be. I got the bee touch. But, so, long story short, I now have a bee colony.
Did you find the queen?
I don't know.
That's
I never
what
saw
like.
her.
People are always like, you got to get the queen and this and that. Like, I've even talked to Slade about it. He talks about the queen all the time. I'm like, is the queen any different than the rest of them?
Yeah, it's like the brain. So, like.
Well, I mean, but you can't see her brain. You said the brain?
She's like the brain. So, like,
yeah, right. But, like, how do you know which one is, like, you can't just look at them, right?
Yeah, you can.
I thought they were just, like, a touch bigger where you can't really even tell, but there's a million of them in there.
Nah, I think you could probably tell just from the videos I've watched. I'm not a bee expert or anything.
Yeah.
Or expert.
You might be an expert, though, at some point.
I might be one of these days. But, so I think the queen's like 1.5 times the size, and she has a real elongated abdomen, and she's going to be lighter color. So, anyways, I didn't see her, but I went over today, which is 24 hours after the collection. No bees in the original hive location, and a ton of bees still in my box doing bee stuff. Like cool. Working on the comb and stuff. So I think she's probably in there. I don't know for sure. I'm not going to jinx it. I don't believe in jinxes, so ain't no thing. But I'm pretty sure all is well. And I don't know this for sure, and if you're a bee person, holler at me. My boy Slade has been super helpful, but it's always good to get a second opinion. I think that if you don't get the queen, it's not the end of the world, but it's so much better if you do.
Yeah.
I think they can hatch another one, or there might be one on the way, you know, or whatever. So
Princess, like a princess.
yeah, a little Princess Peach in there. That's
so-
your Mario Kart character, isn't it?
No, yeah, I love Racing with Peach. No, I'm Wario, dude.
Are you?
Evil.
Yeah, it's good. Bowser. I used to do Bowser all the time.
I don't like him.
Yeah, that was the cool part of my land this week, man. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the bee stuff,
Cool.
more than I thought I would. And now I've got 3/4 of a little bear over here full of honey from my own property.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
It's like so good.
Is it? I'm gonna have to taste some here in a second.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you. I don't really have a medium for it, so you might just have to use a spoon.
Squirt it in my mouth,
Yeah.
dude. That's how I do it in my house.
Powerlifting style.
Yeah. So, are you gonna rob again this year?
I don't know. I don't know how this works. There's a bunch of honey in the box right now that I put in there for him.
Are you gonna have to buy like all the tools and stuff to do it?
No, man.
Slade has like a crank, like a bucket. You crank this thing and it like squeezes the honey out, or like no, it doesn't doesn't squeeze the honey out, it throws it out like all on the sides.
Oh, it's a centrifuge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I did it caveman style and just squished the comb with my hands and got that out, and it looked pretty efficient. Like I don't think I lost much.
Yeah.
So
Did you eat any of the comb?
well, I don't like to like chew the wax because it gets all of my teeth real bad.
Yeah,
but I put it in there and kind of. It's really strange. You don't know this, but for those of you who may or may not have dabbled into tobacco in your lives, it is a lot like chewing tobacco. Like you take that comb, squish it around your mouth, and put it over on the side and suck on it, and you get the honey out of it.
I don't really have anything cool and new going on with me. I would rather Whit probably give us some cool things.
He has a lot of cool things to say, I guarantee you.
All right, let's get him on the phone then. All right, so now on the line I have Whit Fosburgh of the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. What's happening, Whit?
Not a lot, Tyler. How about you guys?
Running around like chickens with our heads cut off, man.
Guarantee you.
Trying to get this thing ready. You know, it's pretty much right after work, and you know, we pretty much ran in the door and set this thing up and troubleshot everything, and now we're talking to you on the podcast. So we're happy to be doing that right now. But
It's great talking to you guys.
Yeah.
I haven't talked since saw you at our media summit this summer.
that's right. Yeah, it's and man, that was an awesome event. I appreciate you having us out for that because I think I caught my biggest trout on that trip.
Okay.
You know, we went down to Yellowstone. I think most of y'all or most everybody else kind of went down to Madison or something, maybe.
Yeah, Madison was slow that day.
Yeah. But anyway, we're talking today about conservation, obviously, but the conservation a lot of times when you talk about the issues surrounding it, you see kind of a bleak picture that's painted, and I think the intent is well-meaning. It's to kind of to drive people to stay involved, to get others involved that aren't involved. But sometimes it just kind of makes me feel, or somebody who might be, I guess, working towards these conservation issues, especially a young person. I think you've probably been around the block a time or two and know that these things develop over, winds develop over years and years sometimes. And so, but for me, sometimes it just makes me feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. So, I want to kind of just promote the wins that we've had in conservation lately, because I know there's a lot of things going on in North America, and I think hopefully this will be a great source of encouragement for people who don't know where to start or would like to get involved. So let's start where the Europeans began changing the landscape in the Northeast. What's the big win there lately?
Well, let me just talk about your general thesis to begin with. And I mean, honestly, these are the good old days. I mean, hunting and fishing and fish and wildlife conservation is in great shape in this country. And you think about where it was, back in Theodore Roosevelt's time, a century ago, white-tailed deer were almost extinct, black bear, buffalo. There was a time when the duck stamp was passed in the 1930s that there was a real fear that a bunch of the duck species were going to go extinct. And today, we have sharpshooters in Rock Creek Park in D.C. because there's so many deer. We got elk at numbers we haven't seen in ages. And even with a lot of the predators in the ecosystem, like wolves coming back. So these are the good old days, and the notion that it's just gloom and doom out there, which is what we thrive on. is just not true. And we've got to make sure that we protect what it is that we've created here. I mean, the whole North American model of conservation, is the best in the world. I mean, we have, a true professional wildlife management system in this country, paid for by the folks who use it, the hunters and anglers. We have 640 million acres of federal public lands to go play on. We've got a bunch of state lands and other places to go out and enjoy. And unlike Europe or England or some places that, this is a sport for the common man. So you can get out there. It doesn't matter how much money you make or what your socioeconomic status is, that you can get out and you can hunt and you can fish and you can enjoy this amazing bounty that we have because, people is all of us own the game and the fish in this country and not just the landed gentry. And it's what makes America cool. It's what drives the whole outdoor recreation economy. And Roosevelt felt back in his time, this was a way that people could go out and test themselves, get in the backcountry, see nature, experience the things that he did that he credited with making him a man. And we have that, same opportunities today, and it's awesome. And, so let's just use that as an overall backdrop. But then we get into any individual place, and there are threats, but there have been threats all along. And it's because our community has been engaged that we'd be able to push a lot of those back. Now, you talk about the Northeast and some, good stories there. And, there are a lot of good stories in the Northeast. I mean, that is, think about just the landscape there. The forests have really come back everywhere from, the Adirondacks in upstate New York up through, Vermont, New Hampshire. At one point, all those areas had been largely clear cut for the timber industry. And when they created the Adirondack Park in the 1880s, it wasn't because they wanted to, sort of preserve special lands. It was because, all the fires, all the erosion were threatening the New York City and the Albany water supply systems. And so we have, much healthier, forests today than we did a long time ago. Yeah, we have a lot of threats with, blights and invasive species like the emerald ash borer. But still, we've got some really nice, intact, forest system that provide great hunting up there. So that's one thing. And you think about, one of the issues that we have to deal with a lot here in terms of federal policy is chronic wasting disease, which really threatens deer hunting around the country. But the Northeast is one place that's really gotten it right. It's not in, Maine, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire. It was in New York State, but they found it and they addressed it aggressively and they haven't found it back again. So it really provides a lesson that if you can, identify the disease out there, and whack some deer when it comes in, you can really keep it under control, or in New York's case, actually get rid of it altogether. Yeah. So there's some really good stuff happening there that I think other states in the country could really get a lesson from.
Mm-hmm. So New York's the only state that's actually gotten rid of it once they found it, right?
Yeah, and they were fortunate. It had a very small outbreak in really one place, and it was a captive facility. They killed the deer. They killed a bunch of other deer around there, and quarantined basically that area, and then did a bunch of testing, and it's just never come back. So they were lucky they got that first deer. Mm-hmm. That appears to be sort of a very isolated case. Mm-hmm. But it also sort of argues to the point that you could take it seriously and be aggressive when you find it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They would, they'd have to knock out about half of our state if they quarantined the areas around fenced down here in Texas around fenced operations.
No, I know. I mean, and that's not just Texas. I mean, Wisconsin, has had a big explosion in Pennsylvania lately. Mm-hmm. But look at a state like Illinois, which sort of got it too, but then was pretty aggressive in dealing with it, and it stayed below 1% of the overall deer levels. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so if you do treat it aggressively, and you follow the science, and you don't let the naysayers get in your way, then you can take care of it. You may never get rid of it, like New York did, because that was a very isolated case. Mm-hmm. But you can keep it at a way background level where it really doesn't have any implications to the overall population or to people hunting them.
Yeah, exactly. And another positive guy that we know and was there this summer, Brian Murphy from the Quality Deer Management Association, he always likes to say that I think it's 97% of counties in the U.S. don't have CWD. And all the while it is something to be aware of, it's not like it's the apocalypse of deer, at least yet. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it can be if we're complacent about it.
Right, right.
And if it gets everywhere, I mean, a place like Wisconsin is in for a world of hurt for a long time because, it just did not address it the way it should have, and it's over 50% prevalence in a bunch of those counties. And a lot of the states, like even Minnesota now, is taking it really seriously because they don't want to be like Wisconsin. So they're, really clamping down on the captive deer farms. They're being very aggressive about, what comes in and out of that state. And honestly, it's what we all need to be thinking about, even us hunters. A lot of us blame the captive deer industry for moving around deer, and there clearly is a lot of blame there. But hey, if you and I go to hunt in Wisconsin and throw a deer in the back of our truck and drive home, we're culpable too.
Sure.
So we've just got to, as a hunting community, recognize this is the new normal. We can't do things necessarily the way we've always done it before.
Yeah, for sure. So if we were to head south a touch, the Mid-Atlantic is a place that I would really like to visit sometime that I'm not actually playing football or doing something where I can actually, go out and visit, because it just seems like this kind of isolated, kind of under the radar area that's also really diverse. What's going on in that area right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth coming up here and checking it out. I mean, DC is in the Mid-Atlantic area, and it is an amazing, I live right in, DC, and I can get out and, be fishing in 5 minutes from my house. And, get out and, deer hunt 45 minutes outside of town. Some of the best waterfowl hunting in the country is out on the Chesapeake Bay and the Eastern Shore. And the bay itself is really amazing. I mean, we have this big, shallow estuary, which is the Chesapeake Bay, that has several big rivers that flow into it, including the Susquehanna, the Potomac. And it has been, sort of the lifeblood of this region for a long time. And it's where all the, largely most of the striped bass spawn, and it's, just an incredible, resource. Now, it got seriously trashed in about the last 50 years. Overharvest, pollution coming from, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, Maryland, Virginia, all the other states that, around the bay. But really that tide has turned. And we started to see, better and better numbers coming out of the bay in terms of water quality, but also wildlife species. Crabs, oysters, striped bass. And what we don't want to do is, sort of get complacent again and go back to where we were 50 years ago when it was really a dying body of water. And there are some things like, there's a weird little fish called the menhaden.
I don't know what one looks like still. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So it's also called bunker up in, northeast. It's called pogie in the Gulf. And basically the only thing it's good for is everything else eating it.
Yes.
And so it is truly the base of the ecosystem. And back in the early 1900s, there were what were known as reduction fisheries up and down the East Coast. And these, they would send boats out, they scoop up the menhaden and purse seines and grind them up for oil, for fish food, for fertilizer, for pet food, whatever it might be. And then finally, they figured out that that was not sustainable. So every state in the East Coast, except for Virginia, banned, basically what they call reduction fishing, scooping them up and grinding them into something else. But Virginia still has one plant called omega protein in Reedville, Virginia, that basically kills 80% of the overall harvest of menhaden on the East Coast.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they have spotter planes and big ships that go out there. And it is, by volume, the second largest fishery in the United States behind Alaskan pollock. And if you get a fillet of fish or something, that may well be an Alaskan pollock.
Right.
So and now these fish has been purchased by a Canadian company called Cook Industries. And Cook bought them because now they're grinding up these fish and sending them to Canada to feed pen-raised Atlantic salmon, which is also a totally unsustainable fishery. So we have, one unsustainable fishery sustaining another unsustainable fishery. And we finally have a chance now to change the way that whole fishery is managed. In 2020, the governing body of all the states in the East Coast, called the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, is set to move from a single species model, which is basically how many menhaden can you catch before you collapse stock, to how many menhaden can you catch while still taking into the needs of the broader ecosystem. So what do the striped bass need? What do the weakfish need? Bluefish, the bald eagles, the whales that eat these. they are also filter feeders. So a lot of them breed or spawn in the Chesapeake Bay. So what they do is they swim around and basically filter the water. So there's a direct implication on water quality. Mm-hmm. The more you have, the better you're going to do. But even with today's harvest, they estimate that it's reduced the striped bass population on the East Coast by about 30%. Mm-hmm. Now, that is really significant because striped bass is by far the number one recreational species in this country in terms of economic impact. So 2020, we may have that change. We may go to a system where it actually recognizes the ecological value of these fish and not just how many we can kill before we collapse them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you just said something really big, and I want to make sure I understand what you said. You said that striped bass are the most economical, or let me rephrase this. They have the most economic impact as a recreational fishery of
Correct.
anything out there. So
anything out there.
We're not saying just fish, but animals too. So more than whitetail.
No, we're just saying fish. So
okay.
Of all the recreational fish.
But more than largemouth bass,
catfish, all that.
No, saltwater. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Saltwater.
Okay. But still, okay.
I'm glad you guys are there to correct me.
No.
I get babbling and I forget a few key qualifiers.
I didn't mean to take you to task.
Saltwater recreational fish.
Gotcha.
So striped bass is bigger than salmon on the West Coast, just bigger than redfish in the Gulf.
Yeah.
It is a huge industry.
Still, that's very huge. Yes,
mm-hmm.
That's incredible. That's so cool. And it's so strange to see that contrast of menhaden because in the Texas Gulf, we actually kind of have an issue with too many sometimes. And it's because of fertilizers, from what I understand, and runoff in a different situation there, which we might get into some of that later. But so up there, the menhaden are actually a key component to cleaning the bay.
Cleaning the bay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they clean the bay, and they basically provide that base for everything else to eat.
Yeah. Cool.
So where would you consider the Mid-Atlantic stopping on the north and south end?
Oh, I'd say it's New Jersey down through North Carolina.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was kind of thinking. I was just making sure, clarify that. Cool. So if we keep driving south here on our road trip, we get to the Gulf states, which we happen to be one of those here in Texas. But maybe let's start kind of over in Florida on the East Coast, and because I know there's a huge and very important ecology over there.
Yeah, I mean, and actually that's one of the that has been a scary story in recent years. I mean, you probably saw all the stories about the red tide and the algal blooms off the east and the west coast, and that was a huge problem because that impacted not only just the fishing industries on both coasts, which it did, but even if you were the rental industry, who wants to go and rent a condo on the beach if it's stinking with red tide and dead fish and you can't
Right.
it hurts your lungs to breathe it. So, and that is really a direct result of the way they manage water in the state of Florida. So historically, the central Florida, the Lake Okeechobee area, when that would, the water from there, drains south through the Everglades and then down into Florida Bay and east and west. And, going through that acted as a giant, basically, sponge that, not only reduced flood flows, but cleaned that water as it went through. Now, in our wisdom, Corps of Engineers decided years ago that they were going to divert all those flows and send them east and west instead of south. Mm-hmm. So now there is not that filtering capacity that we used to have. And instead that water gets pumped out as fast as it can be, to the east and the west, which causes these, huge algal blooms. Mm-hmm. And so finally, as a way to really restore the Everglades, the state of Florida basically committed to $1.2 billion to build a whole new reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee that would catch that water, filter it, and then send it south instead of east and west, and really restoring those original flows to the Everglades. Mm-hmm. And then Congress in December passed something called the Water Resources Development Act, which basically committed $200 million a year to do the same thing in federal funds to match those state funds. So all of a sudden now we are on the fast track to Everglades restoration.
Cool.
Now, fast track is a relative term.
Yeah, sure.
It's still probably going to take a decade to get this built and to get that water flowing south. But we're further along there than we have been for my lifetime, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So I understand that there's a lot of politics involved with the Everglades situation. And in particularly, we're talking about big sugar, right? And that has a big impact on it. So what are the difficulties and how is that overcome when you start you can't just throw money at things, right? So, like, how do you mitigate the situation with Big Sugar, and then also with those landowners and stuff who live south of Lake Okeechobee?
Yeah, so a lot of the land that will become this new reservoir is being purchased from Big Sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And they've sort of squawked over time because they keep trying to drive up the price of what they get paid for acquisition of this area.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to get their money one way or another. So I think the politics have gotten a little bit easier in the state in recent years when they realize they have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And even if Big Sugar doesn't like it, they're going to get compensated. And that is in the taxpayers' interest to even buy them out, so that basically the Everglades, east and west coast fisheries, everything else can get restored.
Yes.
So I think the politics are a lot better now than they have been. But you're absolutely right. The reason we're still talking about this, when we have been for 30 years, is because of that sort of politics of do nothing versus do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And now we finally gotten this compromise, and Rick Scott, when he was governor of Florida, deserves credit because he helped push this through. A guy named Joe Negron, who was the Senate leader in the Assembly down there, was really the driving force behind it. But then also, not only just the Florida delegation in Congress, but really everybody else that recognized that the Everglades are a national resource. They're not just a Florida resource.
Mm-hmm.
And came to the table and gave the money that's going to be needed to fix that up.
Cool. So, what about the rest of the Gulf? What kind of winds are we looking at in the remainder of the Gulf throughout those states?
I mean, actually, as much as the damage that the Deepwater Horizon spill did, a ton of money came into conservation after that. Close to $20 billion. Mm-hmm. And so we've been really active. Our guy in Louisiana has been helping shepherd a bunch of projects down there to restore barrier islands, to recreate marshes, to reconnect the sediment flows that come down the Mississippi. I mean, we have a huge problem in that Louisiana area because we channelize that river and put up big dikes all along the way. And so in the old days, when it would flood naturally out over a broad area, and that sediment would build land or keep land up there. When we diked it and changed that sediment flow, what we did was all of a sudden there was nothing to replenish all those wetlands. So they began to sink, and Louisiana loses, I can't remember, a staggering amount of land, every day through just subsidence. So finally, now we have a process really because of the Deepwater Horizon, penalty monies that, is, projects going on all the way from Texas over to Florida to basically rebuild that coastal ecosystem. And that's going to be good for fish and wildlife, but it's also good for, the communities that live along there. Because when you have barrier islands, when you have wetlands, it protects those communities from the storm surges, from the hurricanes that come along. I'm going to be going down actually this weekend to shoot some geese down in your state of Texas.
Ooh, conservation season.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, baby. So I'm going down to something called the Sabine Ranch, which is over near Beaumont.
Yep.
And it adjoins the McFadden National Wildlife Refuge.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really cool project that the Conservation Fund has done. They have purchased an old ranch there and helped do some restoration work on it. But it's 12,500 acres is going to be donated to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and that refuge, which is going to really protect the largest freshwater marsh in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that money to do that acquisition was paid for with some of these BP funds.
Wow.
And, they saw it after they, Harvey, which dumped like 50 inches of rain down there in the refuge. A week later, that refuge did exactly what it's supposed to do, which is basically become a big filter and a sponge and protect those flows. And what it did was capture all that water, let it soak in, and that nature worked the way it's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so those types of projects, not only acquisitions, but also restorations of, the flow sediments, or the flow regimes that produce the sediments, the barrier islands, oyster reefs, artificial reefs, those are going on all over the place. And that is really good for fish and wildlife, and it's good for that whole ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you. I was much younger when this happened, I guess, and I'm asking you to try to, because we all love conservation here, but be as unbiased as possible. How fair was the BP deal to BP?
Well, I think it was pretty fair.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the way it's supposed to work. I mean, you do something that is not only negligent but borderline criminal.
Mm-hmm.
You deserve to pay a penalty for it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was a slap in the wrist, I mean, what would prevent the next company from short-circuiting or shortcutting all of its things it's doing?
Sure, yeah.
So, and also, I mean, you're forgetting the impacts to tourism, to the fisheries, not only recreational, but also commercial. And it's really hard to quantify a lot of those damages. So, BP is not going out of business because of this. They make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, as I think it sent a very important signal to the rest of industry that you cut corners like that, you're going to pay the price if something goes wrong.
Right. I guess I just didn't know the details of it because at that point in my life, I was kind of just ignorant to what actually happened in that deal.
Yeah, we also don't know what the long-term impacts are. What are the impacts of like those sediment, the oil and stuff on the pelagic fish, the tuna? We really don't have a really good handle on that still because those fish are so long-lived that, it's going to take a while really to understand what happened.
And then you throw tarpon migrations and stuff like that in there. It's just, it might be 20 or 30 years before we see the huge impact that had. And hopefully that doesn't happen, but it could.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm just pleased at is the money that they, paid up didn't just go to the federal treasury to, be spent on God knows what. It is actually being returned to fixing up those places where oil and gas has had a big impact.
Yeah.
I mean, from the, diversions to, everything else we've seen. I mean, listen, I drive a car, I heat my house, so I appreciate that they're there. But at the same time, you can't deny that they had an impact on the ecosystem of that Gulf. And when something like this happens, I'm glad to see that money is going back in to fix that up.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's nice to not see it just disappear into a party fund for politicians or something. So,
as much fun as that would be.
So, so leaving the Gulf states and heading kind of north, well, you might end up in the Midwest. And I know people like to lump it into the Midwest and then the upper Midwest, or they like to delegate that. But maybe we'll lump it all together, even though Missouri may be a lot different from Wisconsin or Ohio or something like that. But what are the progress that we're seeing in the Midwest as a whole, kind of?
Well, I think that what the area you're talking about is really sort of the breadbasket of the country. Yeah, that is agriculture country. It is, as for our corn, soybeans, a lot of the wheat, comes from that general part of the world. So you can't talk about that area and talk about conservation without talking about the Farm Bill.
Sure.
And so in December, January, December or November, I can't remember the exact date, we finally passed a new Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill works as a 5-year bill. So you make basically a 5-year commitment of what you're going to do. And, a few years before this Farm Bill was coming up, we pulled the conservation community together and really, basically sat them in a room for a few days to come up with what our collective priorities are going to be. Because in the past, it's been very easy to get our community to just sort of break apart like a covey of quail. When somebody dangles a little like Benny for your program you really like, maybe a CRP program that the pheasant guys love, or a duck wetlands program the duck guys love, or a water quality thing that the fish guys love. And so this time we basically made a commitment that, we're going to stick together and we're going to put forward recommendations that float everybody's boat. And we're not going to stray from those when the pressure gets on. And I think we were pretty successful in that. And I think that the new Farm Bill that we got in December really is a testament to that. It's got $5 billion for conservation, which is the same as the last Farm Bill, which is good. And
real quick, Whit, when you say we, you're talking about the different conservation orgs underneath the TRCP umbrella. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the way, just so your listeners understand how we operate, we are a coalition of basically right now 58 different organizations. And we have basically an agricultural wildlife working group, which is the folks that work on the Farm Bill. That includes almost 30 different groups. So that's Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, Delta Waterfowl, Mule Deer Foundation, Whitetails Unlimited, QDMA. When I just rattle off all the list of the various species groups that have something to gain from conservation on private lands. And, as much as we like to talk about public lands, 70% of this country is in private lands. And about half of that is enrolled in some sort of conservation program. So these are huge benefits to, in like Texas, those areas you're talking about in the Midwest. there's not a lot of public land in those states.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to incentivize the private landowners to do what's right for conservation. And they'll do it. Majority of them are really good stewards, but it can be pretty hand-to-mouth running a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to cobble together all the different programs you can get to stay above water sometimes. So we were really pleased the way this farm bill came out. I mean, the Conservation Reserve Program, which if you're a pheasant hunter, you know all about, got expanded from 24 million acres to 27 million,
right.
which is a good expansion.
Mm-hmm.
There's
because it has been in decline, correct? The last several times.
No, that's the first time it's had an increase since 1996.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, there's a little less money that goes with it. So from a budgetary standpoint, it came out kind of flat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as great as it sounds, but still it's good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big easement program called the Agriculture Conservation Easement Program. And that's on an increase of $200 million a year.
Ooh.
So, and that is for much longer term easements that protect things like wetlands, which is obviously if you're a waterfowl hunter or you care about water quality, that is a really significant program. A lot of people don't know it, but the Farm Bill also pays landowners to open up their land to public hunting and fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a program known as the Voluntary Public Access Habitat Improvement Program, VPA HIP. And they got an extra $10 million into that. And the way that is spent is that's about a $50 million program now. So the way that's spent is actually it's competitive grants to states. And then the state gets a block of, say, a couple $1 million. Then they go out and negotiate easements with private landowners. And so the private landowner gets a payment, and in return, he opens up that land to public hunting and fishing and public access. And the state assumes the liability. So if somebody falls in a ditch and breaks their leg, that private landowner is not, liable for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Farm Bill has a ton of different benefits from ecological to just even hunting and fishing and socioeconomic. So we were really pleased when we got that, and that impacts every state throughout that, that Midwest from Michigan all the way down through Arkansas, Missouri.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I guess if you were to kind of head west from there, you're getting into more plain states. Are we looking at similar winds there, or is there anything different? Or
yeah, certainly the Farm Bill had a big impact on a lot of those plain states. I mean, you may go from sort of row agriculture, which is what we see in a lot of the Illinois and Iowa, to more cattle grazing country, but there are certainly benefits there in the Farm Bill for those areas. And the other thing I would talk about in terms of a lot of those plain states, especially more of the western plains, like eastern Montana, eastern Wyoming. That's sage-grouse country. Mm-hmm. And if you're a bird hunter, sage-grouse is probably one of those species you actually haven't hunted for, but it's probably on your bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
It's big and it's slow and something that even I can probably hit. And it eats pretty well. But it's mostly really known for these sort of weird mating dances it has. And your listeners can go on to, just go on to YouTube and Google National Geographic, the sagebrush sea. And there's a great sort of a 1 hour documentary on sage grouse and that sage ecosystem.
That's cool.
And this was a species that was declining rapidly. The historians say there are probably somewhere around 16 million sage grouse in that, sort of the Rocky Mountain Plains area. And it's really over 11 states. Historically, today, we're probably at about 500,000. So there was a real threat that this bird was going to get listed under the Endangered Species Act.
Mm-hmm.
So about a decade ago, a variety of different interests, including the federal government, but ranching groups, environmentalists, sportsmen, all got together and said, what can we do basically to keep this bird from getting listed? Because if something gets listed in the Endangered Species Act, you sort of move from the realm of voluntary conservation to the government telling you have to do it, which makes it way harder.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's for agriculture and everybody, right? That's
exactly,
that doesn't just affect hunters or fishermen.
Yeah, and I mean, think about sage grouse too. I mean, this is a species that grew up in areas that don't have trees. Mm-hmm. So anytime it sees something, it gets away from it because that's where a big raptor would sit, and that's really its main natural predator.
Mm-hmm.
So if it sees power lines, if it sees an oil derrick, if it sees a wind turbine, it's going to vacate that area, and that is the major reason we were seeing this sort of broad decline in the species. Also, an area gets overgrazed, then there's really no place for it to hide, and nothing for the birds to eat. So you had a whole bunch of different factors coming together. So oil and gas was part of these agreements. And in 2015, everyone came together, and Fish and Wildlife Service, and at that time the Obama administration, announced that agreement had come, and they were not going to list the species, and that had huge implications. And it's over 70 million acres over 11 states. And the Trump guys came in. There was a lot of fear they were going to completely blow that up. But instead, they actually took a much more deliberate process. Yeah, they opened up all the plans in these states, but they asked the changes that the governors might like to see. And governors made small tweaks, but they basically kept the plans as they had been. Mm-hmm. So what could have been a real disaster and a real sort of a sense that, gosh, we'd worked all these years to put together this voluntary plan, now it's getting blown up, that really didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So I think actually, and we talked about the sage grouse, which is a cool bird. Mm-hmm. But that same ecosystem, that's critical habitat for mule deer, for pronghorn, and for basically 350 other species that live out there. Mm-hmm. So there was a real fear that if as the sage grouse goes, so go all those other animals. Mm-hmm. And we've seen the mule deer numbers out west are declining in a trend the wrong direction too. So we hope that this is going to stabilize that too.
Yeah, sure. And I guess using a sage grouse as an indicator species is a great idea, but it's also difficult because, they're ground nesting birds, so they're going to have varying population levels annually, right? So it's much more about the trends than it is more about the current now, what's going on with sage grouse, right? So you really have to look back historically.
Yeah, that's a great comment, because you can have a few years of drought and the numbers crash, mm-hmm. and that's natural. That's that's always happened. Then you get a few really good wet years, and you get a lot of vegetation, and sage grouse numbers explode again. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see a lot of variation in populations regardless. But you're absolutely right. It's those long-term trends that matter.
Mm-hmm. We don't have to go on like this big pump fest necessarily, but I would like to give props to the TRCP because of something you mentioned earlier. You guys are really great, in my opinion, at not fear-mongering too much and just allowing the politicians to, we're presenting the information to you. Y'all make a good decision, do what is right, kind of thing, instead of kind of, thinking that the world's going to end one day and then the next day, everything's fine. So I would definitely give kudos to you guys for being that kind of an organization.
Well, I appreciate that. And we try to do that. Listen, I get pissed off. I call people, I call them out for doing bad things. And honestly, we ought to be doing that. But you ought to just make sure the science is behind you. Right. Make sure you don't make it personal. Mm-hmm. Just because somebody has made a bad policy choice doesn't mean they're a bad person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And remember that the pendulum swings back and forth. You can't align yourself with one party here because, Republicans are in charge one day, Democrats will be in charge another day. These issues, conservation, hunting and fishing, have always been issues that bring us together. They shouldn't be issues that divide us. Mm-hmm. You look back at, Richard Nixon's time. And Nixon was not, he'd probably never been outside in a national park. Right? but he understood that in a time of Watergate, the Vietnam War, race riots, that this was something that could bring the country together. So that's when the Clean Water Act was passed. That when EPA was created. Mm. All happened under Nixon because that was something that transcended politics. And I think the issues today are the same. We had yesterday, a huge victory in the Senate. A big public lands package passed, permanently reauthorized the Land and Water Conservation Fund. It had a provision in there that affirmed that all public lands are open for hunting and fishing unless they're specifically closed through a public process. So this had huge wins for everybody. This thing basically passed, I think the final margin was 92-8.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And one of the fine senator from Texas was one of the nays, so that was cool.
well, I wasn't going to mention that.
Yeah.
He has never been a huge fan of conservation.
No, he hasn't. He has not.
But we're not going to name names here.
Yeah.
But anyway, but this is another example that, we don't have to be shrill. We don't have to say that, that the sky is falling on this stuff because, we have, basically, right is on our side. I mean, this is good for everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat.
Yes.
Right. Sure. That's awesome. So could you give a quick rundown for those who may not know what the LWCF does?
Sure. So Land and Water Conservation Fund was created in the 1960s. And that time there was a big debate going on about whether to open up the outer continental shelf of the U.S. to oil and gas development. And they finally came up with a compromise that, yes, they would open it up. But in return, the oil and gas industry would pay $900 million every year. And in 1965, that was a lot of money, into a special fund that would pay for conservation. It would pay for land acquisitions. It would pay for city parks. So a lot of the really important land conservation projects we've talked about, and we've seen in this country, and it may be a great hunting and fishing area. It may also be the Manassas battlefield outside of D.C. Those were protected under Land and Water Conservation Fund. Now, the problem is that initially it was, I think, a 50-year authorization, which is a long time for Congress. That came 3 years ago. Congress gave a 3-year extension to that. That ran out in September. And so there was real concern that we needed to get this reauthorized, and we need, basically, it shouldn't ever expire. Money keeps going into the federal government, so it ought to keep coming out for these good things. And so as part of this big public lands bill, we finally got that permanent reauthorization. And now that goes to the House, and the House has got to vote on it. We think that's going to pass easily, and then it'll go to the president for signature, and we think he's going to sign that. So at the end of the day, we'll at least have a permanently reauthorized Land and Water Conservation Fund. Now, the other problem with this is that $900 million that the oil and gas industry pays into this fund, only one time in the last 50 years, or 54 years now, has Congress actually given all that money back out for conservation. It raised that fund and pays for deficit reduction, for God knows what, those big parties we were talking about. So now the big fight is going to be, since oil and gas industry is paying into this fund already, why is it that Congress gets to raid it and spend it for other things? Let's take it off budget. Money comes in. Let's get it spent out. And that's going to continue to be a fight because Congress likes to raid it for other projects.
Right.
Sure. Do you feel like there's enough hands reaching out to get the conservation funding, or is it a situation where that money sits there for just long enough for somebody else to say, hey, we're going to take that instead?
Well, I mean, the problem with this is how this whole bill was written in the first place. It should have been taken off budget from day one. And there are a lot of true trust funds that were created where the money gets collected and goes into a true trust fund that gets spent out for the purpose, that it was intended for. I mean, you look at things like the Pittman-Robertson tax, which is if you buy a gun or ammo, that goes into a federal account that then goes out to the states to pay for conservation. Fishing side, it was the, Dingell Johnson, then called the Wallet Bro program. Now, those were true trust funds. That money was collected, then goes back out to the states. LWCF was not set up that way, so it gave Congress the ability to raid it. And I think that we're naive to think that, Congress is ever going to change its ways unless they're told they can't do that anymore.
Yes.
So anyway, I mean, we've been getting about $400 million a year over the past decade or so, which is still a lot of money for good projects. But there is a huge backlog of really deserving projects out there that can't get funded because, Congress doesn't appropriate all the money it could.
Gotcha. So the funny thing about politics is words never really mean what they're supposed to mean. In this sense, is permanent really permanent?
Yeah, unless they unauthorize at some point. I mean, you can go back and eliminate the program if Congress wanted to do that. I think that would be, I can't imagine them doing that. So, no, that actually means permanent.
Good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So, once the settlers made it through the Great Plains, they came to this huge wall of mountains called the Rockies, and it stretches from, I guess, New Mexico all the way up into northern Canada, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very large area. I'm sure there's some conservation wins that have happened in the Rockies lately.
Oh, yes, my friend. So, and also, if you're a big game hunter, that's sort of Shangri-La. That's where you go out to chase your elk, your mule deer, all of your sheep, whatever it is you're into, the animals that I never see back here. But anyway, so it's just super cool country, and just an amazing part of that is public lands. And so I mean, that is really, the bounty that our forefathers have left for us. Now, we've done a lot to screw that up. And we've, developed a bunch of areas really with short-sightedly not thinking about the fact that, for example, these animals have to migrate. Mm-hmm. They hang out up in the high country in the summertime, grazing and eating whatever they eat. And then come snows, they move down and they have to migrate someplace where they can, survive the winters. And so National Geographic and others have been doing a ton of research on this, and there's some just super cool videos about this. But a lot of the focus has really been on, recently on this sort of that Wyoming area, that south of Yellowstone going down toward Pinedale, and mule deer migration. Mm-hmm. And they've discovered that mule deer will travel up to 200 miles every year during this migration.
It's crazy.
And a lot of the places they go, they need a few things. I mean, they need stopover points where there's really good habitat. They can eat and gain their strength and keep moving. They need to be able to get through little pinch points, which may be a quarter mile wide that the entire herd has to move through. And then they have to cross a variety of highways and fences. And so, now there's a real process. I'm going to give the Trump administration a little credit here because, they put that forward a secretary order last year, directing all the agencies to identify, these migration corridors and do what they need to do to protect them. And so what they did was put a call out to all the Western states and said, tell us your 3 to 5 most important wildlife corridors, and we'll work with you to conserve those. So the states have identified those. In some states, like Wyoming's got pretty darn good data on this. Other states have almost none, so it's kind of like guesswork. Mm-hmm. So there's part of research was needed too, and they've kicked in a little money for research on this. And so now I think we have a real opportunity to conserve those areas. Because if you're in the oil and gas industry, you can plop a derrick right down in the middle of a migration corridor, or with a little forethought, you can move a couple miles off it and drill diagonally underneath it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It may add a few more dollars to your cost of operating, but it's going to protect that migration corridor. Mm-hmm. And so now there's really some new attention on just doing it right and identifying these key areas. There are some areas out there that honestly don't have a ton of ecological value. I mean, I'm sure my brethren will kill me for comment like that, but they're perfectly fine places to put oil fields or solar arrays or wind farms. But other places are incredibly important ecologically, mm-hmm. and really we're just figuring out that data to tell us where those areas are and how we can conserve them. Mm-hmm. Now to give a little bit of criticism of the Trump administration, they got these areas from the states, and instead of saying, okay, we're not going to do any leasing in those areas, they just kept on leasing. Mm-hmm. Now their response is, well, if the state wants us to withdraw a lease in the corridor, they will do that. But that's throwing the onus back on the state to ask for something so that the state now gets the ire of the oil and gas industry. And, it just seems like kind of a cop-out there. But the overall intentions of the program are good, and we're going to try to make it work over time.
Mm-hmm. That's something Joel's been working on a lot, I guess?
Yeah, Joel Webster runs our Western Public Lands program out of Missoula, and he's been really involved with that whole program.
We might have to get him on sometime to talk about that.
Yeah, you ought to, because he's way more knowledgeable about it than I am. In fact, it was a program that we tried to get the Obama administration to put in place. Mm-hmm. And they were nervous about it because they just thought that industry, grazing community, others were going to just object. Mm-hmm. So they were going to put some really namby-pamby language in the handbook just saying, look out for these things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, the secretary order that Zinke did was far stronger than that. Mm-hmm. And so we give them credit for that. But now there just has to be some teeth in the implementation.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Is there any incentives set up in place for say, like grazers or oil companies or something to actually have practical practices that help this ecologically? Like a while ago, you said it would cost a little bit more to diagonally drill. Is there any funding coming in anywhere to actually incentivize them to do such things?
Not so much with the oil and gas industry. I think the thought is they make so much money anyway that they can afford, a little bit extra costs, mm-hmm. especially if it sort of, reduces the risk that, groups out there go in and file suit or protests against it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the legal costs alone, I suspect they'd probably make money long term by doing it right in the first place and avoiding these conflicts. Mm-hmm. On the private land side, there are some programs, certainly in the Farm Bill. There was a whole program about working lands for wildlife. And there are incentives and grants that go to private landowners to do the right thing for wildlife. And that may be like redesigning fencing to make it easier for animals to move through. And they've been doing that for sage grouse, but they also can do that for big game. We hosted a workshop down in Salt Lake City a couple of weeks ago with the fish and game departments of all the states and the departments of transportation for all the states. Because, we have a highway bill coming up in the next couple of years, and we need to be thinking about, wildlife crossings. Because if you can either sort of let these animals, play Frogger going across the road, or you can put in an underpass or an overpass and allow these animals to move across. And I think long term, it costs a little bit of money, but you're going to save a ton of money if you're the insurance company on cars getting hit. You're not going to have people killed by colliding with a moose or an elk. And I think overall it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. We like sensible things.
Yes.
So, if you were to follow the Rockies all the way down to New Mexico, you start getting to a different world in the Southwest. And we have what we consider this part of the Southwest in our state here in Texas as well. But I know it's arid country and there are issues around water, I'm sure.
Oh, there are. And a lot of it involves the Colorado River. But we actually had a big breakthrough in that this past year, too, when all the states along the Colorado River finally agreed to a drought contingency plan. And which means that basically that has to be authorized by Congress, but we think there's going to be relatively small opposition to that here. But it essentially lays out the fact that, as waters, flows decrease, how that cut is divided up, among the various states. And it's your first step for basically, starting to take less water out of that river, where it's already over appropriated. You've seen the pictures of Lake Mead. And, but this finally becomes a step that everybody's on the same page, but how we can sort of reduce consumption here, which is critically important for a bunch of those trout rivers that are along, that form the tributaries of the Colorado River.
Yes.
And in places like Wyoming and Colorado, you got some of the best trout fishing in the world out there. And but there's a huge pressure to divert more and more water as communities like Denver and Boulder, and Phoenix, as they grow and grow, everyone has their irrigated lawns out front.
Yes.
We can do a whole lot better than that.
Right. So, am I wrong? Is California a part of this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep, California's part of it too.
And it goes
Southern California takes a bunch of water out of the Colorado.
Right. That's what I thought. I thought I had seen a special on that one time. So so what states would this involve?
Oh boy, now you're that'd be from everything from Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, California. I'm probably missing something in there.
Is Mexico involved?
Well, they're going to be part of the beneficiary of this because ideally, they actually get water.
Right.
So because there are a lot of years where no water flows into Mexico.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. Okay. So good for them, I guess, even though they're not really technically a part of that.
Right. But technically, I think we're supposed to leave some water in for them to get, even though they don't get it usually.
They've been getting the short end of the stick
fact
for
that
a
we
while.
actually have something that flows to the sea is a good thing.
Yeah. No kidding. Cool. So, if you were to head up now on our trip here, and we're kind of getting towards the end, we're heading north, and we get into the Pacific Northwest, which I guess is maybe Oregon, maybe Northern California, all the way. Couldn't you say all the way to Alaska, pretty much?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think there are different issues along there, but I'm going to give you one success story. You guys saw the reports about the fires out in California and Washington, Oregon last year. It was just devastating. And and part of that is some of those were on private lands and doesn't really have a whole lot to do with federal policy. But a lot of those were national forests, and we have got such a screwed up system of how we fight forest fires, or how we pay for fighting forest fires in this country, that it directly contributes to getting more forest fires. So right now, unlike any other natural disaster, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, if a catastrophic fire comes through, the Forest Service has to pay for that from its core budget, which means now, I think last year they spent almost 60% of their budget fighting fires, which means there's no money to go in and do habitat work, to do fire prevention work, to do clearing, do thinning, any of the things you would need to do to protect communities in the future from other fires. So last year we got a deal finally worked out that takes catastrophic fires basically off budget and moves them over to FEMA, which is where all the other emergency disasters are paid for from. That will allow the Forest Service to actually get back into the business of managing habitat. And if they're managing habitat, that means they're, not only is that good for fish and wildlife, but that's good for fires. That's good for getting rid of invasive species. It has a whole host of different, positive impacts. Right. And that's going to impact any of those states that have large national forests, including Northern California.
So you just said pretty much that the Forest Service is now going to have a 60% increase in available funding.
It won't be quite that much because basically only catastrophic fires. Okay. But that's probably half of their overall firefighting budget are these just massive fires we've never seen before.
Sure.
But now that we're seeing all the time. So those are the ones that are taken off. They're still going to have to fight fires from their core budget, just the regular fires, sort of the everyday fires that we've seen in the past. But it won't be this overwhelming burden like they have right now.
Yeah, sure. That is terrific. So does that go along with a new look at how we manage forests in the West and with, maybe more controlled burns and that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that, listen, there was, you think back to the early 80s and the sagas of the spotted owl. And listen, the pendulum has swung too far. We were cutting way too much timber on a lot of our national forests. And, but now the pendulum is overswung again, and we're not cutting enough wood. And to the point where we've actually lost a lot of mills out there that we need now if we're going to go back into sort of rational forest management, which includes, thinning work, it includes restoration work, it includes, sort of doing much more aggressive harvesting around communities, that sort of forest fire interface. The urban, forest interface where we see a lot of the fires and where the people get really impacted. So I think we're going to see, I think also there's been, we put stuff in the farm bill. There was another compromise. We did the forest, funding fix to make it easier actually to get wood out of the forest because, largely a lot of the Forest Service, would spend, a year or two designing a timber sale, get everybody bought off on it. Most of the environmentalists, the timber community, sportsmen's groups. And then the 11th hour, some group that nobody ever heard of files a lawsuit. And it, takes another 2 or 3 years to get it out. And so we finally got some stuff in there that sort of protects against that frivolous, fighting for folks who think that every tree is sacred, should never be cut. But, that's, the reality is that, active forest management is a good thing in most places. Hey, I love wilderness. I love those areas that never get cut. But you need to have that mosaic. You need to have areas that are managed too.
Yeah.
Right. So what else is going on up there?
We got a big river. Everyone's talked about, salmon in the Northwest. And, salmon populations are in pretty grim shape, all the way up to Alaska. But we have a project that is going to happen beginning, I think, in 2020, where a bunch of dams on the Klamath River are going to come out. They're old dams. They don't produce much power. And the power company, PacifiCorp, agreed to a program that it would basically abandon those dams and have them removed, and the federal government would oversee that process. And that has the best chance for restoring salmon in that sort of central coast area. The Klamath is right on that Oregon-California border.
Okay.
And it's beautiful habitat. And if we get rid of these dams, it's going to open up a bunch of areas for spawning that haven't been there for generations. So that's a good one. We have, there have been other dam removal programs in the Elwha and the Olympic Peninsula outside of Seattle. That came out a couple of years ago, and I'm actually our media summit this year is going to be out in Seattle. So you guys hopefully get to see it. But we're going to do a trip down there, before or after the summit.
Awesome.
And really see that river, see what it looks like now the dams are out, maybe even get to do some fishing.
Cool. Wow, that would be cool.
Yeah.
I have just got to drive over that river once, and it was pretty. It gets kind of surreal when you get out there on the West Coast and see those big, giant, clear rivers. It's just I don't know. You see big rivers in the West, but it's a different thing when that there's used to be millions of salmon that run those.
Right, and those salmon are coming back in a hurry in the Elwha. And it's a great story, and I've not been out there and seen it, so I'm excited to go do that.
Yeah, very cool.
And then we go further north up into Alaska. I mean, that is one place that has not screwed up its salmon yet. In fact, it does a remarkably good job of managing its fisheries overall, and salmon included. And but even there are constantly threats we're having to deal with, like the Pebble Mine of the headwaters of Bristol Bay. And we thought we had that mine pretty much on the in the coffin with a bunch of nails coming in, but now it's like a zombie. It's raised back up again. And, so thanks to this EPA administration that, sort of has green lighted the permitting for the project. The project could not be a worse designed project. It is two of the largest salmon rivers in the world, the Kvichak and the Nushagak. And it's an area where, seismically active zone that, and it would require this open pit mine and this giant tailings pond that would require that's forever, mitigation. And the notion that we would put that in a place like that and threaten that salmon resource is just remarkable.
Yeah.
So, I think that we're going to kill this thing eventually, but what we thought was just about dead a while ago is now staggering around again and waiting for a few more blows.
Man.
Blows to the head.
Let's send the knockouts in, man. We need it.
Well, that's awesome, man. So lots of good things going on. Like you said, I don't know. This has built my confidence in what we're doing. I'm glad that you made that statement at the beginning about how this is the good old days, because glad to be alive if that's the case.
That's right, man.
We appreciate all your knowledge and as far as that goes, there's a lot of knowledgeable people that work for the TRCP. What's the best way for people like us to get involved and allow you guys to inform us of the issues?
Yeah, so just we don't do magazine, we don't do direct mail, but just come to our website. It's www.trcp.org, and sign up as an activist. Make a little donation, get a hat, get a knife. Get a big enough donation, get a Kimber rifle.
Nice.
But and also, listen, we're looking for folks who want to be, activists, who want to be advocates, who want to help us, get the word out in states around the country. Mm-hmm. And if your folks are listeners or game to do that, look us up, contact us. We have ambassadors in a bunch of our states, which are basically, really skilled volunteers that are engaging on certain issues on our behalf. And we'd love to have more of those.
Yeah.
So anything the folks can do, we just don't sit in your recliner and do nothing.
We're actually sitting in recliners right now.
But you guys are doing something.
That's right. Yeah. So that's cool. We'll link to that. If you want to sit
in your recliner and send us a check, that's fine.
Yeah. No kidding. The money helps too, right?
Oh, always.
Yeah. So we'll link to that. If you're listening, the link to TRCP is in the show notes right here below. And Whit, man, we appreciate your time and, like I said, your expertise, your knowledge about all these different things. It makes me feel small in this world to listen to people like you, but that's a good thing.
Hey, listen, I'm just really appreciative you guys are just so committed to getting the word out about this stuff, because a lot of the folks who do the hunting shows, just it's all about just the kill,
Sure.
And it's not about why we're able to do this stuff. So I really appreciate you guys getting the word out.
Cool.
Thanks, Whit.
Well, thanks, man. I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon.
Sounds great, guys. Call anytime.
Okay. Right. Have a great evening.
All right. You too.
See
ya.
Bye-bye. I feel like my mind's eye has at least seen the whole continental U.S. at this point.
You are almost about to be there anyways. You go everywhere.
I do.
You've seen it all.
Dude, I'm thinking I'm taking a big trip to I've still got several places I haven't seen.
Actually, Whit's country, I haven't been up there much. I would really like to go see that.
So I kind of talked about this in the interview with Whit, but I got to go up to Annapolis, Maryland, which is in that same area, mid Atlantic kind of thing. We played Navy up there, so I got to see that part of the country. We went to West Virginia, which is up that way, I guess, but yeah, I haven't been up to really the Northeast at all.
The Rosenbauer country.
That's right. Your boy Tommy.
Yeah. Man, you know what? I feel good. Like that interview did its job. You know,
dude.
like there's so much of this like doom and gloom, especially by some of the 3-letter organizations running around out there, and we really need to like realize that it's not all bad, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of good things happening. This world is a good place, and it's better than it used to be.
Yeah,
right. It's not like it's like just spiraling down into this, pit of nothingness.
That's right, man. It's just crazy. I kind of was talking about it. I was trying to say it without saying it, I guess, earlier. But, like the LWCF is like, if you'd asked me 2 months ago, I said, no, it's probably not going to pass. Mm-hmm. Just because of all the media that I had consumed, I guess. I didn't know, but it just seems like that's the way everybody's talking about it. And it passed with flying colors.
Yeah, and this is one of those things where it's like, it's probably our own faults, because if you get all your information from one place, it's going to be biased and it's going to be skewed. There's just these natural biases. Is that?
That sounds good. Yeah, I like it.
Or biased?
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So
biases
that people have, and sometimes they're more prominent than others, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't do your due diligence and get out and learn things on your own and look for sources nowadays, because apparently like the news isn't going to bring it to us, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to get out and get the real scoop. And that I was so guilty of that, because I just bought into like what the rhetoric was from one place.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, our 4-letter organization here, TRCP.
That's why, dude. They got 4 letters. That's why they're legit.
That's why they're doing a good job, man. I feel like, like you do. You have to do your research and check up every once in a while. But when you do your research and you find, and I've said this before, you find an organization or two that you feel like you can depend on. That's when you go, okay, this is a busy time in my life. I'm just going to rely and trust these couple of organizations. And in 2 years, I'll check back in and make sure they're still doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how you have to approach it, because you can't, personally, as just a blue collar guy that works a lot and has a family, I can't really stay up to date on everything that I would like to, you know what I mean? Maybe when I'm retired, or if I ever do that, then maybe I'll have that chance. But, or if I won the lottery, which I don't play, so
gotta play to win, right?
That's probably
I don't
not
either.
Look, like I get Christmas lottery tickets every year from some of my family members. So
hey,
you never know.
To quote The Office, your sister'd be happy. I already won the lottery, baby. I was born in the good old U.S. of A.
That's right. That's right, dude. That's right. That's good enough for me. So anyway, don't forget we've linked to the TRCP in this podcast episode. So if you're interested, go check them out. They'll keep you abreast of what's going on. Great organization. We've been really excited to work with them, and just thankful that we reached out stumbling to them at some point, early on.
Do you remember how this all happened, right? There's a little quick thing how cool social media is. I think they followed us on social media when we were a little bitty baby social media account.
Yeah.
And apparently we posted something they thought was cool.
Yeah.
And it's turned into like one of my greatest what would you call this? Conservation relationships?
Sure.
I don't know.
Conservationship.
Conservationship. There you go.
Conservation relationship.
I mean, how many friends and like good people and great knowledge have we obtained through like our relationship with TRCP?
Yeah.
Like most of the ones.
For real, dude. It's so educational when we get to go on those media summits too. It's just like, I remember we had that with Brian Murphy.
Oh my gosh, Pump Fest.
We had a CWD rage.
The QDMA endorses
what did he say?
What's the word? It's a moratory or something like
Moratorium.
that. Moratorium, yeah, on the movement of any live service. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about.
Dude, he was like ready to punch. If you'd like tapped him on the shoulder, he would have just smoked you in the face, dude.
I didn't, dude. He had the Irish thing going at that point in time. He was ready to go.
He was ready to throw it.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I said, the link is in the notes here. And then also we have linked to the Texas Public Land Buck, the first one that we got. Casey got a shot, and I thought that made a really great film, man. So I hope you guys, if you haven't seen it, will check that out. And a small game Saturday is coming soon. We're going to post that video, I think, Tuesday, hopefully, if everything goes right. So lots of cool things going on right now. We're trying to work through this off season together. Let's just be friends and hug it out, and hopefully we'll get a turkey season, shed season, and sail into fishing season after that.
Oh man, it was 73 today, so fishing season might be now.
Hey, dude, even the birds are starting to sound like spring.
Hey,
you know
I
what mean?
heard geese today. The geese are coming back through.
There you go.
Heard a hummingbird yesterday.
Well, Whit's going to have a hard time finding them if they're...
I know that whenever he said that, dude, I was like, "You going to come down here and hunt electronic calls?"
Yeah,
yeah,
hey,
it's cool,
all
man.
Good, dude. I would, if I had the amount of decoys and everything to do it, I would do it.
Yeah.
Man.
So, I know we're trying to wrap this up, but that ranch he's going to, the state agency I used to work for did the hog control on that ranch.
Cool.
So a lot of my counterparts, they went over there and did the aerial operations on that too, and they shot like 7,000 hogs over there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's a lot of bacon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not bacon.
Yeah. So, we got to wrap it up. I have so many quotes I can do. Are you aching for some bacon? He's a big pig.
Oh my gosh. All right, we got to get out of here. God bless you guys, and remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.